Hi, my name is Christian, and I'm supporting a wonderful nonprofit in Lexington, Kentucky called the Lexington Art League. The Lexington Art Week, the Lexington Art League is a wonderful nonprofit that supports local artists with affordable workspace and gallery space to find patrons. It's located in beautiful central Kentucky. And if you go to lexingtonartleague.org, you will learn more. The Lexington Art League also helps underprivileged children with low or no cost art supplies and low or no cost art teachers. If you want to learn more, please look. You'll find that it's an amazing place. To help support it during Giving Tuesday, this past Tuesday, and will go until I raise $1,969 to support the Lexington Art League, which, if you look me up, my name Thalacker, it's written here. Look me up on Facebook. Find me on Facebook. You'll see a donation page, a charity page on one of my posts. Earlier today, I read from my father's book, The Place of Art in the World of Architecture. That's my Thalacker. I'm going to read the Calder chapter today. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll find if you donate, you get a gold star. More importantly, you'll help Central Kentucky artists and underprivileged kids. So on with the show. My father was the first, the longest, the best director of the federal government's art and architecture program. And to kick this program off, which was founded by President John F. Kennedy, but tragically, there was no funding for it because President Kennedy was murdered. And President Johnson wasn't interested in the arts per se. But President Nixon was interested in the arts, and he did fund this. And my father was chosen as the art and architecture program's first director. And the very, very first, the inaugural modern artist, the inaugural American artist, was Alexander Calder. So I'm going to read about that first project here that my dad wrote about in his book on page 20. So here's the page. There's a few more pages that I'll read from today, now. So again, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy this. 54-foot Calder sculpture arrives for erection here. Headline the Chicago Daily News on October 8th, 1974. Windy birth for Calder Stabile, said the Chicago Tribune on October 9th. Workmen are putting the final touches on another piece of art for downtown Chicago. Unlike Calder's famous mobiles, the flamingo is firmly anchored to the ground and doesn't move, reported WLS-TV's 6 o'clock Eyewitness News on October 10th. And for weeks thereafter, the stories and headlines kept coming. October 16th, Mayor Richard J. Daley has officially proclaimed October 25th as Alexander Calder Day. Daily News. October 17th, Chicago gives Calder a circus. The Daily News. October 18th, Flamingo primed for view. Daily News. Flamingo gets ready for a big day. Sun Times. October 19th, Calder calendar. Daily News. October 20th, Calder in the 20s. I remember Sandy. Sun Times. October 21st, circus gets on Calder bandwagon. Tribune. October 24th, and now it's Calder's turn in the plaza. Tribune. Circus parade salute here set as Calder comes to Chicago. Daily News. October 25th, Calder and his flamingo. Sun Times. Loop Circus Hoopla welcomes Calder. Daily News. October 26th, a great day for Chai Calder. Sun Times. A Wachama Calder sculpture conquers the city. And to Chicago with love. Calder. Tribune. Never has there been such a public outpouring of praise and affection for an American artist as attended the dedication of Alexander Calder's Flamingo in the Chicago Federal Center Plaza. As Calder made his ceremonial entrance into the Windy City, tens of thousands of people lined State Street to give him the sort of welcome usually reserved for military heroes and athletes. Sitting atop the famous Schlitz circus bandwagon, Calder and two of his grandsons were able to survey the entire spectacle, complete with marching bands, calliopes, clowns, antique red and gold circus wagons, elephants, and balloons. The parade even featured a ringmaster, architect Carter Manny Jr., who, as one of the design architects for the building, had initiated the selection of Calder for the project. When the wagon, drawn by 40 horses, pulled up in front of the Federal Center, Manny blew his whistle, and his voice booming through countless loudspeakers announced, "Ladies and gentlemen and children of all ages, I present to the people the one and only Alexander the Great, Sandy Calder." Mayor Daley officially escorted Calder from the wagon as an Air Force band played Stars and Stripes Forever. Hailing Calder as one of the world's truly great artists, Daley spoke briefly of Calder's achievements. Senator Charles Percy, GSA Administrator Arthur Sampson, and NEA, that's National Endowment for the Arts, Deputy Chairman Michael Straight also made speeches. And President Ford sent a congratulatory letter, noting that it was the Calder Stabile in his hometown of Grand Rapids which encouraged me to support the arts when I was in Congress. Pretty nice from our president. Then with a huge pair of cardboard scissors, Calder ceremoniously cut a rope to release thousands of balloons from within the sculpture. As Henry Hansen reported in the Chicago Daily News, October 25th, the balloons, red, blue, and green, soared higher and higher and finally broke into the sunlight as the mantle fell from the stunning, bright red abstract sculpture. Calder, with his wife Louisa at his side, said hardly a word and made no official speech. He didn't have to. His work spoke eloquently to him. His work spoke eloquently for him, and his work was in ample supply in Chicago. In addition to Flamingo, Calder was on hand to dedicate another major commission, a moving, electrically powered abstract mural titled Wood's Universe, created for the lobby of the Sears Tower. Furthermore, the Museum of Contemporary Art had opened a Calder retrospective to coincide with the dedications. The road to this brilliant finale was neither particularly long nor complicated, but it was terribly important because it represented GSA's public kickoff of the Art in Architecture program, then called the Fine Arts in New Federal Buildings program, shortly after Administrator Sampson reactivated it in 1972. Within months of the reactivation, in consultation with Carol Yasko, GSA's Counselor for Fine Arts and Historic Preservation, the architects for the Chicago Federal Center had begun quietly pursuing the possibility of commissioning a major work by Calder. On January 29th, architect Carter H. Manning Jr. wrote GSA on behalf of his joint venture firm, Chicago Federal Center Architects, which included Mies van der Rohe as principal design architect. How great it would be to have a monumental work of sculpture to adorn the Federal Center Plaza. Clearly, the artist should be an American and someone of comparable stature to Picasso and Chagall, each of whom have major works in Chicago. There is only one man who meets these two requirements, concluded Manning, Alexander Calder. I take my glasses off for emphasis. Calder, unquestionably one of the Olympian figures of modern art, was born in Pennsylvania in 1898. His father and grandfather were sculptors, his mother a painter. He studied engineering, enlisted in the Navy during World War I, and then held a succession of jobs, working as a journalist, setting sail on a freighter, serving as a timekeeper in a logging camp, and drawing all the while. In the 1920s, he began creating his circus, articulated miniatures made of wire, cork, and wood. This work inspired the theme of the Chicago celebrations. In the late 1920s and 1930s, he divided his time between the United States and Europe, especially Paris, where he became acquainted with leading modernists of various aesthetic persuasions. Soon he was building his famous mobiles, or mobiles, as my mother likes to say, and stabiles, unique creations that in many ways redefined the concept of sculpture. Writing more than a quarter century ago, or 50 years from today, 50 years ago from today, James Johnson Sweeney said, "Exuberance, buoyancy, vigor are characteristics of a young art. Humor, when it is a vitalizing force, not a surface distraction, adds a dimension to dignity. Dignity is the product of an artist's wholehearted abandon to his work. All these are features of Alexander Calder's work, together with a sensibility to materials that induces new forms and an insatiable interest in fresh patterns of order." In his book, Alexander Calder, published by the Museum of Modern Art, New York, 1951. Indeed, there was only one man who met Manning's requirements. Manning had done his homework. His firm had already been in touch with Calder about the possibility of the project, and Calder had responded positively. He has created a maquette for a magnificent piece for the Federal Center, Manny wrote. The tip of the highest arch would be approximately 53 feet high. It would be made of steel and painted red, a magnificent abstraction to look at from afar, but even more to experience while walking around and underneath. Manny had also secured from Calder's dealer, Klaus Pearls, a price $250,000 plus installation that was reasonable in terms of GSA's guideline, 0.5% of the construction cost of the building. There is another point that makes this project enormously appealing, he added. We have said nothing so far of the Federal Center buildings themselves and of Mies van der Rohe. Clearly, he was a creative giant who himself belongs in the same company with Picasso, Chagall, and Calder as one of the greatest artists of our time. In the view of several who were his lifetime friends and associates, Mies admired Calder's work very much. We thus find it doubly appropriate to realize our goal. Excuse me while I take a drink of ginger ale. Manny also had the future of the Art and Architecture program in mind, as he concluded. We can think of no more appropriate way to launch the program of incorporating artwork into federal buildings. In less than 2 weeks, Commissioner Larry F. Rausch of the Public Building Service had sent Administrator Sampson a memo requesting that Calder be awarded the commission, noting that although selection procedures had not yet been worked out with the National Endowment for the Arts, it was believed that the NEA would readily concur in the choice of Calder. On March 2nd, 1973, Sampson granted his approval, and on March 20th, the Assistant Commissioner for Construction Management, Walter A. Meeson, sent Calder and Pearls a proposed contract, which was in essence the standard contract for architectural engineering services, a more complex document than all artists since Calder have used. On April 6th, Pearls informed Meeson that Calder had signed the contract earlier that week. His letter was filled with very exciting news. All Sunday morning, Calder worked on the detailed engineering plans for the Chicago Stabile, drawing in gussets and ribs, changing the width of certain parts of the arches, and generally giving instructions to Carmen Segar for the fabrication of the intermediate model. Once that model will have been made, Calder will be able to make last-minute changes before work on the large stabile will begin. Administrator Sampson could hardly wait to announce the good news. On April 13th, GSA issued a press release briefly describing Calder's proposed work and promising future details at a news conference to be held on Monday, April 23rd at the Federal Center. It would be an understatement to say that the press was waiting for Sampson in Chicago. The conference room was packed as he expanded on the nature and significance of the Calder Commission, stating in part, "The president has said that only if the arts are alive and flourishing can we experience the true meaning of our freedom and know the full glory of the human spirit. No artist in America today more typifies that same freedom and human spirit than Alexander Calder. And no city better represents America's freedom and spirit than Chicago. It was 1962 when sufficient congressional and presidential interest prompted renewed efforts to include fine art in federal buildings. For the next 3 years, an effective arts program was again a priority of the federal government. Unfortunately, history has a way of repeating itself. Just as the rejuvenated federal arts program was beginning, economic considerations forced it to a back shelf one more time in 1966. Fine art remained in the background until President Nixon urged government involvement in and support of the arts 2 years ago. It is this commitment that brings me to Chicago today and will, in the years ahead, bring art to all the people of America. Calder's sculpture is even more significant as the first in a new program to place fine art in federal buildings. The president's commitment is to forge a new partnership between government and the arts to the benefit of the people of America. You know, as I'm reading this, I can hear my father and mother proofreading these passages when my father took a sabbatical to write this book when I was a child. And memories are stirring within me of the pride I felt and the wonder of him writing a book and my mother helping him edit the book, word by word, sentence by sentence, photo by photo, story by story. The telephone calls that he would make, the artists who would come to our house for my mother's quiche and salad, and the all-night discussions they would have of art and politics. And I hope that as I take just a moment in between reading passages here, that you'll consider donating to the nonprofit, the Lexington Art League, that I'm a board member of here in Lexington, Kentucky. That if you want to find something worthwhile to invest in during Giving Tuesday, which started a few days ago, please go, just look me up, Christian Thalacker on Facebook. I'll accept your friend request. Take the time to donate $5, $10, $25, $50, or if you can give more. God bless you. The donation page you'll find is on my Facebook page to the Lexington Art League. It'll mean a huge, huge difference to underprivileged children who need art supplies, who need art instruction. You will set them on an amazing path, one maybe similar to Alexander Calder. It will make a huge difference to gifted artists who need affordable workspace and no-cost gallery space, which the Lexington Art League provides here in Lexington, Kentucky. You could very well be grooming the next Alexander Calder. So thank you, and I'll get back to reading now. The newspapers picked up on Sampson's statement with lightning speed and bold headlines. And the citizens of Chicago eagerly awaited their Calder. Meanwhile, Segres Ironworks in Waterbury, Connecticut, worked diligently at its fabrication. By the end of 1973, the stable was almost complete. And on December 28th, Carol Yasko made an inspection, the results of which he reported in a memo dated January 2nd. It is a graceful and impressive piece of sculpture with excellent scale for its place in the center. Calder supervised the final development this fall and inserted some secondary vertical planes, which appear to spring from the base of the main arches and add greatly to the texture at the human scale. His final hand is also apparent in the richness of detail throughout, which was not apparent in either the maquette or the preliminary study, both of which I have viewed. The sculpture is signed by Calder about 7 feet above the base of one of the main arches. You'll see it if you go, or when you go to Chicago, you'll see it. It's signed C.A. And you should provide, especially if you go with your daughter or son, niece or nephew, provide space for them to sit on your shoulders and give them some beeswax that's silver or bronze or gold colored and a sheet of parchment paper, and let them rub Alexander's signature, which is C.A., almost like a brand on a steer. That'll be a wonderful memory. All right, let me get back to reading. Flamingo was shipped to Chicago for installation 10 months later, following substantial underground structural modifications to support the work. Its bright orange-red arches and planes enliven the plaza, bringing Calder's grace, wit, and intelligence into the lives of passerby. Writing for the dedication brochure, Calder said, "I feel an artist should go about his work simply, with great respect for his materials. Sculptors of all places and climates have used what came ready to hand. They did not search for exotic and precious materials. It was their knowledge and invention which gave value to the result of the labors. Simplicity of equipment and an adventurous spirit in attacking the unfamiliar or unknown. In my own work, when I began using wire, I was working in a medium I had known since a child, for I used to gather up the ends of copper wire, discarded when a cable had been spliced, and with these and some beads would make jewelry for my sister's dolls. Disparity in form, color, size, weight, motion is what makes a composition. And if this is allowed, then the number of elements can be very few. Symmetry and order do not make a composition. It is the apparent accident to regularity which the artist actually controls, by which he makes or mars a work. Food for thought there. A few days after the dedication, William Morrison, the Chicago Regional Commissioner of the Public Buildings Service, overheard two men complaining about the waste of their tax money on that piece of junk. He moved closer, interested to learn more about their views. When he heard one man say to the other that he wished the government would refund the wasted money, Morrison took 2 pennies from his pocket and, interrupting their conversation, gave 1 to each man. Considering that all the people of America paid for this work, and that you, believing it to be a waste, wish to have your portion returned to you, I am giving you each 1 penny. I can just imagine how furious he would be. Which is more than your share, he said. Now that you have been repaid, let me tell you that this work of art belongs to all the American people, except you and your heirs. The men were stunned. They tried to return the pennies as Morrison went back to his office, overlooking Calder's magnificent flamingo. So that is the Calder chapter of The Place of Art in the World of Architecture that my father wrote, with a beautiful, poignant introduction by Princeton art history professor Sam Hunter, the late great Sam Hunter. You'll see my name down below, Christian Thalacker. You also see it here. Please look me up on Facebook during Giving Tuesday Challenge to help nonprofits. Please go to my Facebook page and please find one of my posts where I'm asking people to donate to the Lexington Art League, a nonprofit that helps underprivileged children get much needed art supplies and art instruction. And also, very importantly, the Lexington Art League helps Central Kentucky artists with low-cost, affordable workspace and gallery space and gallery events so that they can find patrons, hopefully, like you. So I appreciate your time. Bless. Have a wonderful day. If you have any comments, please comment.